Let me take you back a few months to a time where I was fully locked in. So I was working on my first side hustle, and after school I went straight home and started cold calling, writing mails and working on my first project with a client. Sometimes I even took my school stuff with me to the gym in order to learn between sets, because I was just so busy. However, on the weekends, when my brain was already fried from constantly being busy, I allowed myself to rest. However, resting wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. It didn't feel relaxing. I just couldn't calm down. If that sounds like you, stay with me here. Because I actually found out a reason why this happens to so many ambitious people. And spoiler, it has nothing to do with them just being born that way, but more with how they choose to measure themselves. Look, if you have seen any self-improvement videos out there, you've probably also seen that discipline, locking in, or hustling gets hyped up all the time. However, nobody talks about the dark side of discipline that so many of us experience. This constant stress that won't go away, because there's always something else you should do right now. Or this feeling when you're already overworked and you know you need rest, but you still keep pushing. Not because you have to, but just because you can't turn it off. Because you feel so guilty when you let yourself rest for a minute. This feeling of constantly beating yourself up because you should do more, even though you're already working all day. I know how this feels. I was in this exact same situation too. However, don't get me wrong here. I'm not trying to shit on discipline or productivity at all. Because, to be honest, discipline in itself isn't the problem here. It's something else I've never really seen anybody talk about. Because discipline can be great. It's the thing that lets you be in the driver's seat of your life. It's the thing that makes you able to choose where you're going in the first place. And it was also the thing that gave me back control over my life in a time where I struggled. Because before I've built a certain level of discipline, I really felt like I had no control at all. It felt like my phone, weed and random impulses were steering the ship. However, what I asked myself later was this. If discipline was all good, why did my most disciplined time almost feel as bad as my least disciplined time? Why is the thing that is supposed to give me back control over my life now not letting me rest? Why is it the thing that never lets me breathe and keeps me stressed all the time? Why does it feel like discipline is haunting me? The reason so many ambitious people struggle to relax isn't what most of them would expect. You don't feel restless because discipline is bad. You feel restless because your relationship to discipline sucks. Let me give you an example. Because in my life, productivity only started to feel that way after something else changed. When I started working on myself, I stopped smoking weed, massively reduced my screen time, and replaced that stuff with more healthier things. Like, for example, going to the gym or spending time in nature. And to be honest, that wasn't easy. In order to make this change, I had to build some discipline. However, until that point, I was far from miserable. I still was a pretty balanced and chill guy. The moment this flipped only came later. It came when I added something new to my life. When I started my first serious side hustle, I thought it would just be another thing I was doing besides school. Like going to the gym, going a bit more into nature, stuff like that. However, quickly it became way more time consuming than I thought. And after a while, I began to feel that constant pressure. This was also the moment this inability to rest kicked in. Now I noticed that being productive most of the time and then resting wasn't enough anymore. Now every minute I wasn't being productive triggered this intense guilt. And this even happened when I was doing the stuff that used to be relaxing. Like, for example, walks in nature stopped being the thing that cleared my mind, but started to be just another thing that felt like procrastinating. However, the reason that relaxing stopped feeling relaxing wasn't what I thought. And that's where it gets interesting. Because discipline itself wasn't suddenly making me feel bad. But what made me feel that way was this. I now took all my self-worth from how disciplined I was. And that might also be the reason you can't relax. Because if your self-worth depends on how productive you are, relaxing will always feel like falling behind. And that's not far-fetched. It's just logical. If you learned that the only thing that makes you a good person is being productive, Of course, the second you stop being productive, guilt and shame comes up. And by the way, if you ever experience something like this yourself, feel free to share it in the comments. Because I'm honestly curious who watches these videos and if this resonates with anyone. So if you take anything out of this video, let it be this. If your self-worth depends on productivity, resting will always feel wrong. Because every moment you're not producing feels like losing value. But the truth is, work is something you do. It's not what defines your value. And once you internalize this, resting will finally be the thing it should be again.